Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make fig Newtons or fig rolls. I have done these before many years ago on my blog, but I haven't done a video of them, although I've done a video of apple Newtons, a similar thing. So these are a lovely soft, crumbly textured cookie or biscuit dough, which is filled with a mixture of figs in this case. They're actually quite simple to make. They take a little bit of time, but they're quite simple to make and they're very, very tasty. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and we have two stages of the process really, which is the biscuit or cookie dough and then the filling. So for the filling I have 450 grams, 1 pound of soft dried figs, which I have taken the little knobbly top off because that's very tough, and I've cut them into pieces. I have 160 milliliters, 2/3 of a cup of water. I have 80 grams, 1/4 of a cup of apricot jam, 45 milliliters, 3 tablespoons of dark rum. Now if you don't want to use dark rum or alcohol, you could use the same amount of orange juice or even water, extra water if you wanted to. I have 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cinnamon and 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground cloves. And then for the dough I have 280 grams, which is 2 cups minus 2 tablespoons of plain flour. I have 113 grams, 1 stick of cold unsalted butter, which I'll put back in the fridge shortly because we don't need it yet. 65 grams, 1/3 of a cup of caster sugar or granulated sugar. 2 medium eggs, which would be large in the USA. 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And the first thing to do is to make our filling, because we have to put that on the stove to heat. And so I have a saucepan here, and into that I'm going to put my figs and the water and the cinnamon, cloves, dark rum and the apricot jam. And I'm going to put that onto the stove, and I'm going to heat it until it starts to boil, and I'll be stirring it all the while until it starts to boil. Then I'll stir it occasionally, and I want to boil it for about 10 minutes or so until the mixture reduces and softens nicely and becomes quite thickish. So as you can see, that's boiling, and I'm going to turn the heat down to quite a low heat, and I'm going to just stir it occasionally as it all softens and begins to thicken, and that will be ready in about 10 minutes. So I cooked the figs with the apricot jam, the water and cinnamon and nutmeg, etc., and I cooked that for about 10 minutes so that it softened and thickened. So I put it into this bowl, and it's just about cool now, so we're actually ready to go on to the next step, which is to make the biscuit or cookie dough. I'm going to do this in the bowl of my immersion blender. And the first thing I'm going to do is to put the baking powder and the salt into the flour and just give those a mix around to get that combined a little bit. Then I can add the sugar in as well. And then I'm going to put that into the immersion blender bowl, and I'm going to just process it very briefly to help mix it a bit more. That's good. And so then I'm going to put the butter in as well, which is just out of the fridge. And I'll just toss that around a little bit so I get that coated. And I'm going to process that until we achieve a sort of fine breadcrumb-like texture. And that looks quite good. So I'll pour in my vanilla extract and the eggs. I'll just break the yolks of the eggs. I'll put those in as well. And I want to process this until it all comes together into a dough. And as with doing things in a stand mixer, I'm just going to scrape the bowl to get the egg off the side so that that gets incorporated. So that's good. That mixed quite easily. So I'll tip that out. So I'll just put that back into the bowl that I had the flour in, and I will process this mixture to form it into a paste. And that's quite a good paste now. There may be a couple of little chunks in, but that will be fine. So that then can be set aside, but I'll put it back into the bowl that it was in originally. So before we start to roll out the biscuit dough, I'm going to preheat my oven to 180 Celsius, that's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, and I've got a couple of sheets of parchment paper which will go onto the baking trays that I'm going to use. So I'll take about half of the dough and I'll put it onto a floured piece of parchment paper. I don't have to be exact, but about half. And this will form 2 of the logs of dough that I want. And I'm going to roll this out, and I've marked here lines so that between those lines is 32 centimetres, which is about 13 inches, because I want these to be 12 inches long. So I'll also flour my rolling pin because the dough is going to be sticky. And I want this to be about 8 inches in depth and 32 centimetres, 13 inches in length. And that's about good enough. So then what I want to do is cut that into 2 pieces. Like that. And I'm actually then going to cut the paper in 2 as well, along the same line. I'll move one to the side just for a minute. And then with each piece of dough, I've put my mixture into a piping bag. I'm simply going to pipe some of the mixture like that along the dough. Now you don't have to use a piping bag, you can spread it by hand if you want to. And with the mixture in like that, I'm going to turn the pastry over and I will brush the other side with some water. And I'm going to encase the pastry, the filling in the pastry. Just like that. And then what I want to do is turn it over so that it's seam side down and gently move it into the middle of this paper, because we'll bake it on this. And I'm going to put that onto the baking tray and do the same with the remaining 3 pieces. And so with 4 rolled out like that, and I've actually pressed them down just a little bit like that, I'm going to put those into the oven and I'm going to bake them for between 15 and 20 minutes until they turn a nice golden colour, light golden colour on top, and the pastry puffs just a little bit. Then I'll take them out of the oven and allow them to cool down, and I'll come back and show you the results. So I've taken the fig Newtons or fig rolls out of the oven. I baked mine for 17 minutes, and while they're still warm, I'm going to cut off the end, and then I'm going to cut them into 6 pieces. And I'm going to let those cool completely, and once they cool completely I'll come back and we'll have a taste of them. So the fig Newtons or fig rolls have cooled down. They're still slightly warm, but they've cooled down quite a bit now, and this is what they look like after I've put them onto a wire rack. And they baked quite nicely, I have to say. So, and you can see the underside is nicely baked as well. So I'll have a taste of this one. I love that, the flavour of the filling. Just a hint of that rum coming through, but it could be orange juice as I mentioned earlier. And the sweetness of the fig. So there's not very much sugar. There was only 65 grams of sugar, I think, in the pastry, and no sugar in the filling except for the sweetness that comes out from the apricot jam and the figs themselves. So these are very, very good indeed. Extremely tasty. Pastry is lovely and sort of soft and soft textured as well. So a bit of a crunch on the outside, but they crumble in your mouth. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for this recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.